Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 o'clock. We may as well get this show on the road. Wonderful to see so many people here. We always get a buzz out of a full house, so thank you very, very much for coming along. Although I do know the reason you're actually all here is because it's so cold inside and the aircon's really, really good in here. I'd invite everyone to stand, please, and I'll invite Ben Randall from St Mary's to please come and lead us in prayer.
Ki inoi tātou, let us pray. I te atua kaharawa, we give you grateful thanks for this good land, for the industries and economy of our district, and above all for the people of this place who you hold dear to your heart. As we undertake the business of this day, grant this council wisdom and discernment in their deliberations and decision-making. May the work of today help our community to prosper and to flourish. Hear this prayer for your love's sake. Amen.
Thank you, Ben. Now I'll invite Councillor Sally Parker to lead us in Waiata.
Thank you. E re re ra e aku ai mori. E maringi atua ki a koutou e re ra e aku ai mori. E maringi atua ki a koutou rangi tata ki runga kuri ora ki a ka awata ki a pliki ora we.
Thank you very much. Be seated. Gosh, I hope me and Nigel was watching that online. Put him to shame. Now, first of all, I'll just cover off apologies. I just have apologies from Mayor Nigel Bowen and from Timaru Community Board, Gay Broker, and Pleasant Point Community Board, Anna Lyon, and Geraldine Rosie Woods. Rosie is here. Oh, you beauty. Welcome, Rosie. Lovely to see you. Thank you very much. I'll move those apologies. Somebody like to second those, please? Councillor Pye, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. And we'll move straight to public forum. And I'd like to invite Tracy Howard, please, if you could come to the front there.
Great. Okay.
Thank you, Tracy. So as we discussed there, 5 minutes and afterwards the councillors may have questions for you. Over to you.
I would like to say thank you very much to the Mayor and the councillors for this opportunity to address you today on this important matter of international justice and local responsibility, and urge the Council to adopt a resolution align with New Zealand's commitment to the United Nations Security Council Resolution 233 on Palestinian rights. The proposed resolution that Timaru District Council supports Aotearoa New Zealand's government policy as expressed through the United Nations Security Council Resolution 233 and will decline to purchase goods and services from companies identified by the United Nations Human Rights Council as being involved in the building or maintenance of illegal Israeli settlements on occupied Palestinian land. This resolution aligns with our local actions with New Zealand's long-standing foreign policy. A little bit of background. In December 2016, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 2334. This was co-sponsored by New Zealand under Prime Minister Bill English and Foreign Minister Murray McCully. The resolution states clearly that in occupied Palestinian territories, Israeli settlements have no legal validity, constitute a flagrant violation under international law, are a major obstacle to a just, lasting and comprehensive peace. We particularly draw your attention to paragraph 5, which calls upon all states to distinguish between the territories of the State of Israel and the territories occupied since 1967, meaning that countries should differentiate in their interactions and dealings between the land that is part of the State of Israel and the territories that Israel has occupied since 1967. The current situation. Today, this resolution remains highly relevant because both our current government and opposition parties continue to support the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334. On the 19th of July 2004, the International Court of Justice reaffirmed that the settlements are illegal, the occupation itself is illegal, countries must not assist the occupation. On the 18th of September 2024, New Zealand joined 123 nations supporting Palestinian self-determination. And why this matters now. Since December of 2022, Israel's extreme ethno-nationalist government publicly prioritised settlement expansion. In June 2023, they announced 5,000 plus new settlement homes. In May 2025, they created 22 new illegal settlements. Meanwhile, the UN Human Rights Council maintains an updated database of companies that are involved in these illegal settlements. So, in relation to the Council's role, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has confirmed to the PSNA, and I am a representative here today, as well as a ratepayer in Timaru, that they will not be providing any advice to councils as to whether they should pass the resolution. This is entirely a council decision. They will not advise for or against. Implementation would not conflict with government policy. And in closing, and in conclusion, the resolution offers the Timaru District Council an opportunity to align its procurement practices with international law and other groundbreaking councils, such as Nelson, Invercargill and Christchurch, who have already aligned their practice with New Zealand's foreign policy. We appreciate your careful consideration of this matter. Ngā mihi nui, Tracy. And I am so sorry, I forgot to introduce the great lady sitting next to me. This is Ezra Alhout. Ezra is a Timaru resident too. Her whānau are in Rafa at present, so quite a tense time for Ezra. So she's here with me, and I'm here with her today. So that is our statement for you today.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Yes, but we've seen Ezra at a lot of events around town, haven't we? Yes. Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions for Tracy? Not at this stage. How this works, of course, Tracy, I think it was explained to you that we then consider items from the public forum after we've moved through all the agenda items. We can't pass a resolution as such on something that's not an agenda item, but we can discuss it and see what we want to do from there when we do visit it at the end. Okay,
and I think I did forward the whole.
Yes, you did.
Yes,
thank you very much. Yeah, we all have
great.
that.
No, thank you for the
very
opportunity
much
to speak.
appreciated. No, well done. Wasn't that scary, was it? No, you did. Very good. Thank you. And now I'll invite Nathan Hall from the Rooney Group regarding the submission to the annual plan. Nathan, you know what you're doing. You've been here more than twice. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Just some follow-up comments in relation to the submission we made on the annual plan fees and charges, and then having read the council, the report that's on the agenda today. So apart from the cost increases, our submission was about the transparency in relation to fee setting and consistency with long-term plan funding policies. The response to the Rooney Group submission is an attempt to retrofit a process to include fees that have been charged to date but are outside what is provided for in the revenue and financing policy, a high-level fundamental long-term plan document. When setting fees, Section 150 of the LGA does not stand on its own. There's a nexus with the revenue and financing policy. You cannot set fees and charges that are inconsistent with the revenue and financing policy unless you have specifically resolved to do so. Section 150 is just the starting point to make sure fees do not exceed reasonable cost. You then apply that to the revenue and financing policy to determine the appropriate fee for the service. The revenue from fees and charges is then shown in the funding impact statement for each council activity, specifying whether it relates to funding operational or capital expenditure over the term of the long-term plan. The whole process of setting fees and charges in accordance with the revenue and financing policy goes to the core of the principles behind the long-term plan and is crucial to providing transparency to the relationship between the council and the community. So in terms of the report, I don't agree that there are minor gaps in the revenue and financing policy. The issue is that the infrastructure fees in question fund part of the corporate services activity, yet they are not shown as being part of this activity in the long-term plan. And that's the reason behind our comments saying it was as if that business group was almost invisible. The proposed changes to the revenue and financing policy relate to infrastructure activities, not corporate services. The long-term plan describes each council activity group and how it is funded with its own funding impact statement. In my view, in conjunction with the changes proposed to the revenue and financing policy, a change to the description of the council activities and the associated funding impact statements in the long-term plan is also required. Otherwise, you are using the amended revenue and financing policy to collect money in one bucket that actually goes to funding another, being corporate services, which is not at all transparent. I do not consider that there has been sufficient consultation under Section 82 of the LGA to make the changes proposed. The infrastructure charges extend far further than Rooney Group and affect any person that applies for a service consent. There is also an issue in relation to the fees that have been charged and collected to date, which is why a submission requested an independent review of council's infrastructure and land transport fees and charges. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillors, some questions? Councillor Scott, thank you.
I don't have any direct questions to Mr Hull, but I have questions obviously just in council today when we get to that section of our financials. Yeah.
No, good as gold. Yeah, thanks very much, Nathan. We will be discussing this obviously when we get to the fees and charges section and of course again at public forum items regarding consideration. But thanks very, very much for your engagement and your submissions. Much appreciated, and it has actually been very useful as far as I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
No, you're very welcome. Lovely. So identification of urgent business. No urgent business has been brought to me. Matters of a minor nature. Councillor Piddington.
Bay, though it wasn't in the master plan, has turned into a wetland. So I'm just wondering if we can have an explanation. We've told it might be fixed, we might replace it, and we have a second source. So just like to tease that out a bit so we get some sort of timeframes around that and what's involved. Second thing is the Piazza lift. Should have been going by now. We just get told, unfortunately, that they're looking at it. I'd like to see some documentation around what we've actually done to fix that lift. And the third one is around Strathallan Quarter. I think we're heading for a water pump debacle like the Art Gallery with Alpine Energy's sub-main and the entrance to it, I understand, has changed the design of the plan because no one's dealt with it. So just some explanations around those would be great.
Good as gold, thank you. Anything else? No. Any declarations of conflicts of interest?
I just want to note VT board member, but also just want to declare why Central South Island just when it comes to funding today.
Sure, good as gold. Likewise, Councillor Booth and Councillors Parker. Thank you. Confirmation of minutes, item 7.1. The minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of May. Happy to move, Councillor Parker. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jackson. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. Reports 8.1, presentation of Venture Timaru Statement of Intent for 25-26. Welcome to the microphone, our Chief Executive, Nigel Davenport. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, elected members. The SOI, if you remember, the draft submitted at the end of February. We had a workshop where we stepped through feedback and updates and amendments required by yourselves, which have been incorporated. So this is really just a formality of tabling the SOI for your adoption or whatever you do with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr Davenport? Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Nigel. You mentioned in the SOI about the relationship with TDHL and that you've established a close relationship. I'm just curious as to how that's going to work and what you think the benefits will be.
We have had, as the other CCO of Council, we have had a very close working relationship with TDHL now for a number of years. And we are, as has been reported in the paper this morning, will be co-located with them from the 31st of October and makes sense on a number of levels. So we are, as has been reported in my reports and spoken to, work closely around economic and business development, the opportunities to fill up the new industrial park out in Washdyke, as well as other opportunities. We're engaged with local parties, whether they're individuals, whether it's iwi or others, around opportunities for the district as well. So, yeah, very close working relationship with Fraser and the team, as it should be.
Councillor Booth.
Just be happy to move that. Like, I'll
Happy
move
to
it.
move?
Yeah.
You've got a question, Councillor Oliver? Yep.
Just regarding the regional apprenticeship funding, losing the apprenticeship funding, how big a effect do you think that will have for our people leaving school and stuff, knowing that the Polytech's pretty much dead legs walking, so to speak? So how do you think, and should we really be pushing more for that funding to be kept, or what's the go with that?
Yeah, the regional apprenticeship funding came at the right time for us in terms of the timing of it. It was $4 million over the space of 4 years that has helped facilitate north of 130 new apprentices into the trades and primary sectors. It was the first sort of if I call it sort of proactive funding at source, it was through an entity like ours who knew the local businesses, made sure that the integrity of the initiative was maintained. I think you're right, in the current environment, that direct into business support that helps businesses that not necessarily would have taken an apprentice on because of the commitment, both in terms of time and money. And we had a number of examples of those throughout the district. So A, it came at the right time. B, it was a good chunk of money that was available to each of these businesses. Our feedback into MB, who were the provider of the funding, was that it was an ideal, real coalface mechanism to help businesses to take on apprentices. The unfortunate thing is the economic slowdown, the funding ceased. The government, like a lot of entities, are going through some pretty fiscally tight times. So it was one mechanism to encourage apprentices. Talking to the electrical industry yesterday, really quiet out there at the moment. They haven't been taking on apprentices and don't foresee the immediate future. But again, another tool. We continue to press into central government. We've got clear evidence there of the value, not just to us, but to other providers of that sort of initiative. So they're worth their weight in gold, actually.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? So it's been moved by Councillor Booth, seconded by Councillor Burt to receive a note. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Lovely. And now 8.2, the presentation of Timaru District Holdings Statement of Intent. And we have both the Chair and the Chief Executive. Welcome back, gentlemen. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship, Councillors. Thank you for having us today. I'll hand over to Fraser.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for Your Worship, the Mayor and Councillors. So the SOI remains largely as has been presented to you earlier this year. The one update that has been made, this top of page 44 of the report, is that the wording proactive risk management is a critical consideration for the company and is embedded into our strategic framework and within board meeting agendas and programs. An enterprise risk management, a risk register, is maintained and formally reviewed annually. So that text has been tweaked and added since. So welcome questions and feedback. Thanks.
Councillor Piddington.
Can't let them go without a couple. I guess a question to Mark. Core purpose to manage and grow investment portfolio that provides a sustainable intergenerational return and is aligned to the value of the shareholders with us. The question I have is, if Alpine Energy doesn't return a dividend for 10 years, are you looking at other intergenerational things that could return better? And I know the council hasn't said that to you directly, but what concerns me is we've just got it sitting there. No matter what it does, we're going to hang on to it. I don't think that's a smart investment. And I'd like to see what other opportunities and returns we could get over a period of 10 years.
So there's both the dividend return and the capital return, which it's provided over the last number of years. In addition to that, we've got the port as a component of the portfolio. We've got the property as well, and as part of a diversified portfolio, they can balance out underperforming areas over that time. We're looking at the diversification and further investments, which should further strengthen cash flows long term, building up the capital base. We haven't specifically looked at alternatives in place of Alpine, rather focusing on the overall portfolio with Alpine as part of it.
I'll just make a comment there. You've talked about capital growth. Don't Alpine want $400 million in investment over the next 10 years?
No, Alpine are forecasting to invest $400 million into the network. So where that's funded from is a secondary question. Whether that comes from the funding from the RAB calculation through the Commerce Commission price path, or other sources if there's a shortfall in that, and debt funding.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. You say in the statement of intent you've got confidence in the dividend to the TDC continuing to increase by 200k per annum over the next 3 financial years. Given the non-performance of Alpine Energy, how do you back up that confidence that we're going to get that sort of dividend over the next short term?
That forecast is based on quite detailed modelling. So there's detailed financial modelling that's gone into that, and within that modelling we have made the assumption of zero dividend from Alpine, so it's not reliant at all on the Alpine dividend.
Any more questions, councillors? No? Would somebody like to move that we receive a note? Thank you, Councillor Burt. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, gentlemen. You may now go to your appointment nice and early, Mark. Yes. And I'll invite Mr. Brendan Madley and Mr. Bill Steens to discuss 8.3, the Freedom Campaign public survey responses and future action regarding Freedom Campaign bylaw. Over to you, gentlemen.
Your Worship, Councillors, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present this paper. So a slight recap. So last year, Council resolved unanimously to consider developing a Freedom Campaign bylaw. Officers looked at the data set that we had at the time based on roughly 40 to 50 complaints that had been received by members of the public over a relative 2-year period, 40 to 50 depending on how you count them and what data set you look at. And in April we came to Council and said, look, based on our analysis of this data set, we think it's worth asking the community for more information and continuing to look at a bylaw because there might be something here. With your consent, we went away, we ran that pre-consultation, and we received, as previously presented in the workshop, we received 103 responses. We've analysed that data, and as this report breaks down, we assess that based on the majority of issues and problems that the public, most of whom are within the district, but some of whom were not from that pre-consultation, based on what those people are reporting as issues that they're experiencing, that a bylaw would not be necessary to address the vast majority of those problems. I'm happy to go through in greater detail, but I mainly take the report as read. The guts of it basically is that we believe that the majority of the issues, the vast majority of the issues, could be addressed in a simpler and more cost-effective way. So the question then, we think for councillors is, are there other local concerns that you think might be reflected in that data set that you want us to look at because those local concerns might require a bylaw to explore? Any future work that we do on a bylaw, if applicable, would obviously involve additional reports to council. We'd need to do site-specific analysis in terms of what a bylaw design might look like in relation to that site. But for now, our recommendation is simply to warrant staff under the national rule and address what we understand to be the majority of the issues that way. I'll pause there and see if Bill wants to add anything to that.
No, I think you've summed it up pretty well. Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you very much. And thanks very much for the work that you did on this. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Scott.
My only concern is that we're limiting our tools for cost recovery when it comes to like our popular sites, toilets, bins, storage. It's not storage, sorry, different project, signage. And after doing a little bit more research, I understand we can only charge fees on sites, on specific sites, unless they're designated as parking areas. And so are we limiting our enforcement scope? Is just my question. I know that we don't, the recommendation is not to go any further with this, but I am concerned that I need to be reassured that we have the powers in place to address our local specific concerns.
I'm not sure I'm the best person to advise around cost recovery because that's separate to a bylaw. But if I understand your question correctly, then the response I'd give to that simply would be, are there local issues or concerns that you are concerned about that are outside of that national rule? An example that came through in the survey was, occasional overcrowding at Caroline Bay in the summertime. If there is consensus from council that there are some of those local concerns and nuances that can't be captured and reflected via the national rule, then it would be appropriate for us to continue to look at a bylaw and what that might be able to look like, noting that we can't go into detail with that at the moment because there's more work to do on that. In terms of enforcement scope, at the moment a national rule exists that council currently doesn't have the ability to frankly do anything about because staff aren't warranted under the Freedom Camping Act. So the recommendation that we put forward today would enable us to enforce against the status quo. Does that answer your question? Okay. Sorry.
Thank you both. I guess the question came about in some ways was around Caroline Bay and that Christmas New Year period where everyone gets frustrated by it and we say, oh, we haven't got any rules so we can't do anything. And no disrespect to council surveys and everything else, I think we do need a bylaw that is enforceable on that area. And again, every council near us, round us, has one. It doesn't seem to me, surely we can cut and paste with a few little bits and pieces, but I actually want some tools in the toolbox so when we get a complaint at Christmas and New Year on the bay, we can sort it.
Stu, just in terms of the complaints and the issues that you're speaking of, are you speaking of those that an enforcement of a warranted officer couldn't deal with?
I don't think we want to go there, Scotty. We just looked the other way last year on a variety of things, so I'm not in a position to answer that.
I think down at Caroline Bay we have made changes. So we are now charging for staying there. I'm not sure what else we would need to be covering off.
That's a small area outside the skating rink. Last year there were caravans everywhere across the bay. There were dogs, there were people putting up wind shelters. Then they were yelling at people because they parked on the Frisbee golf course and people wanted to play Frisbee golf. There was just a myriad of things that the feedback was, oh, we gave Caroline Bay Association the key and forgot about it. So my inbox was full. So all I'm saying is, if we had some tools in the toolbox, we could fix it.
Brendan, yep.
Councillor Puddington, I do not know in depth specifically what the problems were last summer, but I can say through what we're recommending today, there certainly are tools in the toolkit on a number of aspects. There's about 8 tools in the toolkit provided by legislation, for example, to be able to infringe for non-certified self-contained freedom campers, for damage to the environment, people preparing to freedom camp, bits and pieces like that. If the wider issue is spillover, people being on grass areas that they shouldn't be and things like that, then I would suggest and suspect that there are other tools in the toolkit separate to a bylaw that could address that, most notably how we manage our relationship with the Caroline Bay Association, or how the reserve is managed or how parking is managed. I'm not an expert in that, but it just seems to me that based on what you're talking about there, that a bylaw would be probably overkill in terms of being able to sort that out, that there'd be an easier way of addressing that.
Yeah, I guess I was of the understanding that we actually did have the tools in the toolkit to sort some of that stuff out last year, but we didn't bother to, or we didn't do it for whatever reason, without having implemented an official bylaw. So there were evidently rules there in place that could have been implemented if the officers so chose to do. So yeah, I guess that's what I'd just like to add.
Yeah, my understanding is, according to your recommendation, that if we did warrant officers with the ability to be able to enforce the law as far as freedom camping is concerned, then that's the tool that you're recommending effectively, is it not? That addresses those issues outside of the national law, if you like.
So the recommendation says to warrant staff under the Freedom Camping Act so that the infringement offences that are listed in that Act can be applied. And I didn't present it in this 24 June report, but it's in the 1 April report, and I'll just go through it briefly. A couple of the infringements in the schedule relate to bylaws, so we would exclude that if this recommendation went through and we didn't have a specific district bylaw, but it would be things such as freedom camping in local authority area using a motor vehicle that is not self-contained, failure to display a warrant card, small writing, freedom camping in an area in a self-contained motor vehicle with more people than the vehicle certified for, interfering with or damaging local authority area, flora, fauna, or any structure in the area, depositing waste, making preparations to freedom camp. Sorry, that one's scratched because that's in contravention of bylaw. Making preparations where you're not self-contained, and failing or refusing to leave a local authority area when required to do so by an enforcement officer, being a council staff member who's warranted. So there's about 7 or so measures that this recommendation would give staff, and based on our analysis of what is being reported through that survey, it would address the vast majority of those. We think the question before council then becomes, are those several that that would be outside of this recommendation, those problems, are those considered of sufficient magnitude that you would like us to look to address that via a bylaw? And we don't think that the quantum there or the strength of feeling in the survey was sufficiently compelling that it would be useful at this time. We think this would be an appropriate interim step, see how it goes, and we've always then got the bylaw option to explore in our back pocket if that's deemed necessary. But frankly, we'd be surprised if it was deemed necessary.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yes, that is what I thought. But in fewer words, perhaps, Councillor Burt, followed by Councillor Parker.
So the survey and what it encompassed is exactly right. It was specific to freedom camping in general around what we do and where the places are that potentially could cause an issue, and being warranted covers those aspects. So in the broader picture of that survey and everything, to Councillor Piddington's point, there was a significant issue, apparently 2 years in a row. We were given an indication that housekeeping would be put in place to stop it at Christmas because it was an issue. So the key to it is that apart from some, if you wanted to stretch the ability of some of those abilities to work the existing framework of that legislation might help on individuals. It's not going to help people just showing up and starting to camp there. So the key there, it's fundamental to the fact it's housekeeping and our ability to know and understand who controls the area and accessibility. We need signage up there that say that it is not a camping area and what have you. They need to know fundamentally what their responsibilities are in terms of who holds that key and why, and who makes that accessible. And that basically needs to be done. I mean, the Trespass Act is there. It's council land. There are lots of other tools, but essentially it just needs to be clearly defined. Is that correct?
Councillor Parker, followed by Councillor Pye.
Thank you. My question is, and reflecting back from last year as well, because we can learn from our mistakes, correct? And I agree with Councillor Burt regarding signage. Do the officers have the confidence and the training to enforce these warrants? Because it could be intimidating, and I'd like to know that our officers are equipped with the right skills to be able to do what's been asked of them to do.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper.
Through you, Your Worship. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Parker. Good question. Yes, they are. They're trained and equipped. However, we don't have enough resource. So to Councillor Booth's point made at an earlier meeting, a bylaw comes at a cost. It's not only the cost of bringing it into being, which is reasonable, it'll be the enforcement of it, which you won't recover through fines, because it'd be a great problem to have. I wish we could recover it through fines. But I don't think the problem's got scale. So I think it's better to manage it through some of the other tools that have been mentioned, particularly around access and making use of those warrants that we don't currently have under the Freedom Camping Act.
So with regarding of resources, what does that look like over the Christmas period? Is that a patrol once a day, once every second day, twice a day? What are we kind of looking at for Caroline Bay?
Well, currently in the budget, there's zero. So it would have to be something that would be budgeted for, and we would bring that in, the ability to do that. And it might be we do it on an ad hoc basis, do it once or twice a week with no pattern to it, so that we establish some uncertainty amongst people who want to do that. I think a far easier way would be to put a chain up and not give access to people who don't police it. We have a lot of trust with certain organisations within the community, and if they can't maintain that trust by treating it with respect and looking after the area, then it has to be, we have to do it a different way, and maybe we start putting chains up to limit access.
Brendan, go to you, and then to Councillor Pye.
Just further to Mr Cooper's answer, if I may, just direct elected members to 32 in the report in terms of the implementation and enforcement approach. So this is wider than Caroline Bay at Christmas time, but officers considered that if you went with the recommendation and warranted staff, then it would be prudent to have both internal staff warranted but also an external company warranted, one that we already use for other enforcement matters, and then that would, across that, internal and external, provide resilience, and that would, for example, at Christmas time, if particular individuals were on leave and these companies were able to respond to a call-out, a complaint that council received, and that would enable us to respond in a quicker manner. But as the report outlines, we'd manage that internal versus external use, dynamically.
Councillor Pye.
I would actually like to move the recommendation, speak in favour of it. I can't believe that we think that people come to our district to spend their Christmas holiday is a problem. I listened to Mr Madley yesterday in another context talk about how many policies we have, how he is the only resource, and I just don't see this as a priority at this point in time when we have so much other work ahead of us, and I'd like to give the time to see if the other tools in the toolkit work first before jumping into spending a lot of time and effort on a freedom camping bylaw, and so therefore would like to move the recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Pye, and I'm happy to second that. I think that, if we put a bylaw in place here, they just come here. They'll go to places like Timaru where it's much easier to do their freedom camping, so we'd lose a bit of business, I reckon. And look, I went up to the tech park at the back of Tauranga when I was in the North Island last week, spoke to people up there freedom camping, and that's exactly what they said. If you make it too hard, they will not come. So, this could be in detriment of, the future. And the Caroline Bay thing, I agree with Stu. We could actually do Caroline Bay on its own somehow, but I don't know. I haven't been down there when they've been camping down there over Christmas, so I don't understand how that looks. I'm sure Stu could gather that up. And
Thank you, Gav. Councillor Burt, did you want to?
It's signage, chain and responsibility. It's not a bylaw. It's exactly to Councillor Pye's point there. It's something, if we don't need a bylaw just for that. Anyway, correct. Let's just get on with it.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, I'd just like to endorse Councillor Pye. I think we should second that and move on.
Well, the recommendation, Councillor Piddington would like to speak against the
Yeah, look,
recommendation.
Again, we've got to think this through. I'm happy with the recommendation. Let's try the other tools. But saying put a chain up, they use it for parking during the day for the carnival concerts. The problem's at night. So let's don't kind of think it's easily solved with a chain. That would be stupid.
Well, that sounds like it's going to have to just be something that gets worked through, isn't it, when it comes to that point? So Councillor Pye has moved the recommendation that Council direct the Chief Executive to warrant officers under the Freedom Camping Act and associated legislation and not pursued the development of a Freedom Camping bylaw. Seconded by Councillor Oliver. All those in favour, please say aye. Against?
Sorry, it was seconded by Councillor Jackson, I believe. Sorry. Oh, you did first. Okay.
Against? Carried. Councillor Pye, behave yourself. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Who's going to get the gavel first? It might be you. Yeah.
Just Christmas isn't that far away. I'd like to see we have got the warrants in place and we have got a plan for the bay. So can that go on the action register, please?
Recorded, yes, thank you very much. 8.4, the financial report to May 2025. I'll invite both Ashley and Andrea to the front. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies. Over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We will take the report as read. A couple of things to note in the point number 4 for the debt to revenue ratio. You'll notice that the forecast revenue figure, we've got 132, 171, whereas the total revenue forecast in section 3 is 134, 189. Slight difference there. The reason we've done that is because we believe that the 132 is a more realistic figure. It is explained further in point 4. And there was an adjustment to the minor categories. So it was that was due to general fees and charges and a reduction in vested assets that we are expecting. Alan's favourite topic. A slight improvement again on the deficit overall. And happy to take any questions or feedback.
Thank you very much. You have figured out Councillor Booth already. Councillor Pye.
Apologies in advance, I have a number of questions, but first of all I'll give you the feedback, and I did watch the meeting. Missed and noted you had done this in the last meeting, but the level of explanation is great. Is greatly improved, sorry. I still think there's room for some further stuff. So in some instances, you've told us what area is under or over budget, but not why. So we're getting more detail, but still, is it timing? Is it a genuine overspend? Or, yeah, so great work so far, but keep up the continuous improvement. I'll start with my first question is, why would water rates, I looked at the overall council picture and go, our rates are close to $1 million above what we were expecting, and thought, why is that? We set our rates, we should know what we're getting. But then when I drilled down, I said it was water. So what, maybe Mr. Dixon, who's sitting behind me, is that a timing thing, or how does that work?
So the targeted rates by water are billed independently of rates, if that makes sense. And so that's volume based, so it could be greater or smaller than budgeted.
And this might end up down a rabbit hole, but when we set the budget, if I remember correctly, Alliance was still open and operating, so I would have expected to see that as a deficit rather than $1 million over, or am I missing a key point here?
Pardon? No, I missed the first bit of it, sorry.
I was just saying, when we set the budget, Alliance was still open and operating. And so we would have allowed for their water rate. And so why are we massively over? I would have expected it to be under. Thank you, Mr Dixon.
So remember that half of our water is actually consumed by industrial customers, and that is basically on a volume-based. Yeah. So it is. We predict as well as we can based on the previous year, but sometimes new industries come online or their production increases quite markedly, which therefore, yeah, you can be unders and overs when it comes to metered water. For instance, Mount Cook Salmon has increased their production quite a lot, but likewise Smithfield reduced theirs. So, yeah, it is hard to predict at times.
That's fine, but to my point before, it would have been nice just to have a bit of commentary that industry used more water than anticipated, which I know it's bread and butter stuff to you, but we're only looking at it every couple of months. Yeah, thank you. I'll let somebody else go while I remind myself what my other questions
You're on
were.
a roll, though. You're on a roll, Michelle.
Sorry, Mr Dixon, while you're there. My next one is about roading. So in the CapEx, we are $6 million underspent, if I've read this right, on our roading and footpaths, and this is normally a great area of interest to the community. So have we just not done the work? Are we not doing it, or have we been delayed?
Well, basically, we're trying to make savings, and so yeah, the actual we've reforecast, and I think we're within $2 million of actual year end, or $3 million. So yeah, that's been halved. But yeah, it's about making savings, and also if we unsuccessful in obtaining the NZTA funding, we're generally not going to spend it or defer it until we can.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Right, Councillor
Dixon on
Scott.
that, if you like. Just with regards to our financials on our three waters, there's a lot of commentary around consent delays that are holding up delivery in these areas. So what steps are we taking to resolve this? And my question around the finances, has the phasing in our budgets been reviewed to better reflect realistic project timing?
Through you, Mayor. Basically, the consenting issue is around the stormwater, and we have had to apply for comprehensive stormwater consents, and part of that is an anticipated number of improvements that would have to be made when we get those consents. The consents themselves process is slow, and we haven't actually received all the consents. On that basis, there's actually no need to do these improvements, because the improvements were designed around consent compliance. So it is actually a saving, the fact that we're not having to do that work now. We have budgeted for future years when we're more likely to get those consents. So it's actually a bonus for council at the moment.
Absolutely agree, but that doesn't say it in a financial situation, does it? Because all I know is that the money, we're going to spend it in this financial year, and so the phasing is never quite right. So what you're saying is we might not even need to spend that in this financial year.
Yeah, I think that you've got to look at the year-end forecast figures rather than the budget figures. Yeah, and that is, we're trying to indicate that that's where we're going to land, and that is the realistic timing.
Just a comment on regarding to the forecast for the activities. The current spreadsheet template that we use doesn't pull in the forecast into the individual activities. That's why the forecast is only showing on the whole of council. Moving forward from July, when we're using Magic, then that reporting will have their forecasts once we start to reforecast as part of the activity as well. So you'll be able to see those changes. Yeah.
Councillor Pye.
Most of my other questions are on a similar vein of, is it timing issues or things like that? So I'll park them up, but I did have one around accounts receivable. They are 26 million at end of May, versus 15 million at June last year. Is that normal for the end of May, or is all of a sudden nobody paying their bill? Like, will we expect to see that reduce back to closer to 15 million at the end of June? I mean, it's nearly double our accounts receivable compared to year-end last year. Or have we just sent all our rates bills out and they're due on the 20th of June?
We did, yes.
Yeah, okay, that.
Yeah, they're completely different months.
And I get that, and that was the question, yeah.
Councillor Booth.
Page 71, statement of cash flow. It's a general question, it's not, Okay, payments to suppliers and employees, year-to-date, 95 million. Last year, for the entire year, was 77. There's a $18 million increase, 18 million, and we've still not quite at the end of the year. That's something like 20% increase, perhaps 25. So it's probably going to be 30% increase. What, in general, would that be due to? What would be making up those numbers that have increased by that amount? In general.
I don't know off the top of my head, but we can come back to you with the breakdown of what feeds into there.
What's the projection then for that 95? Where do you think that's going to be by 30th of June? Because this is this 31st, so another month, so you might as well say perhaps another 8 million on top of that. Therefore, over 100 million, perhaps 105, 103 versus 77. That's 30% increase. Is that a timing issue, or is that just, I don't know, it must be apportioned to something significant?
Potential.
We'd have to go back and see what feeds in, and I guess it depends what's happened in the year as well with projects, and I guess the year before there was a bit less. I mean, we've started on, there's been the Egantai Art Gallery and things like that in the last year as well, and a lot of that, some of that was budgeted the year before, but the invoices kind of came in this year.
So what's in investing activities then? Would that not be part of investing, purchase of property, plant and equipment? Or would that so you're saying that Argentine would come into the payments to suppliers and employees?
Some of it has, yes.
If I look at these numbers, and you have a good knack for finding the ones that I think are probably wrong, so I would agree with you. I would say that in payments to suppliers, there's probably some capital sitting in there. Because if you look at the capital number, 34,491, as in cash going out, is virtually identical to the cash that was spent so far, the CapEx spent so far, and I would suggest that there was probably some payments sitting in suppliers and employees. So we'll get a look at that cash flow. Your bottom number will be correct, but there's probably a mix going on between the two that's probably not quite right. And I have to admit, when you do these cash flows, that can be tricky getting those right at times, because they're all coming out of suppliers, and you've actually got to make sure you got the right number down in your capital. So we'll have another look at that for you.
Stu.
Just on that same line, and it might be a system thing, but I would have thought payments to suppliers is totally different from payment to employees, and they should be at least two separate lines, and then the supplier's capital type thing, because, I read that line and think, what are we hiding? Because it's such a big number. I'd like to see them separated out.
Any more questions? Councillor Scott.
Let's have one on the same page, actually, on 71. So we had a drawdown of 15 million. So my question is, are we borrowing to cover operational costs? Oh, I sound like Councillor Booth. Or is it for future capital readiness? And it comes back to my first question, given our delayed CapEx, could some of this borrowing be deferred to reduce our interest costs?
So if you look at the operating activities, that's their income. So that is covering your operating. Then we've spent $32 million on capital, or net 32 on capital, and so then the 15 million essentially is offsetting that.
So the gap, so that's offsetting the gap. Oh yeah, so is that for capital or is it for your...
Capital.
It's for capital, okay.
Yeah.
For readiness, capital readiness for drawdowns, or is it just to...
So we have to hold a certain amount of
Cash.
liquidity, cash. Yep.
No further questions, although there are a couple of things there. I'd like some clarity around the payments to suppliers and employees there, Councillor Booth. Okay. So the recommendation to receive and note, do I have a mover, please? Councillor Baird, seconder, please. Councillor Parker, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies. Thank you. Now, moving to 8.5, the annual plan. First, just need to put a motion that we accept and note the material that is to be tabled at this meeting, being the draft annual plan 2025-26. Happy to move from the chair. Have a second, please. Thank you, Councillor Pye. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Now, I'll just find the right page in here. Page 72. We have the full gang. Welcome, Mr. Stephen Dorr and Steph Dorr, Ford, the Chief Financial Officer, Andrea, and Elliot Higby, Legal Services Manager. Over to you, team.
Through the chair, we drew lots on who was speaking and I lost, so you've got me. So we're pleased today to table the annual plan 2025-26 and its associated enabling documents for your discussion at this meeting. We'll take the report, the draft plan document and the other documents read. Just a reminder, this is based on year 2 of the long-term plan, which was adopted about this time last year, with the report noting any changes to projects or budgets. There were no significant changes introduced during the public consultation or deliberation stages, but proposed changes based on submissions have been made, and items such as trade waste, Taumata RY levies and insurance that were confirmed in the interim have been included and are noted in the report. The plan proposes an overall rates rise of 9%, which is lower than the 12% indicated in the long-term plan. The plan is budgeted to result in an overall deficit of 1.22 million with an operating deficit of 6.83 million. And providing there are no significant changes to the plan at this stage, the team is on track to complete the plan for adoption with the rates resolution and fees, charges, etc. on the 30th of June. And we've got the whole team here that have been involved in putting this plan together, and they are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Lovely, thank you very much. Who would like to start? We know there's plenty of questions there. I'm looking at Councillor Pye because she's always got...
Well, it's got questions on the report for a start. So, point 12, the occupation of a road reserve. It states that we have updated this to actual cost. So 2 questions. One is, how is that going to be determined? And 2, in the schedule, we're still showing $750. if I read it right when I read it.
The updated fee is 385, that's the right-hand column. Updated fee change.
Yeah, green.
26.
Is 750, and then the updated is actual cost.
No, 385. Land Transport Occupational Road Reserve Application 3, 385.
I'm looking at the very first line on underneath 12 on page 74.
Oh, okay. I was looking
Sorry,
on
yeah,
page
but
75.
then now that you point that out, there seem to be three things that look very similar.
Yes, they do too. Yes. So the first line is gone effectively, isn't it?
One's an
750 to actual cost.
yeah, and one's an application fee, one's an amendment fee.
Yeah.
But my question's still valid. How do we determine the actual cost? So is that a time and cost recovery
time.
mode? And why do we still show 750 in the schedule? Just an oversight, or was the schedule attached not actually updated? Was that the original one? Okay. The other question on this report is point 33. This is about LAP, and how we've included a $600,000 fee for that. It says the membership's due for renewal on the 1st of November, and so we can review that prior to the deadline in September 2025. Given that that is a massive amount, I just want to make sure we actually do that, and can we have that on the actions register, that we actually bring a report to council so we can consider and review that, because these things easily just slip by and we go, whoops, we forgot.
Yeah, so the LAP insurance is based on the valuation of the, essentially the underground infrastructure assets. So it went up last year, so 2 years ago it was $396,000 a year. This year it's $500,000, and we're anticipating that the valuation of those assets would go up, hence the increase from 500 to 600. So my understanding for the LAP is that we can determine the value that we would like covered. Is that?
Suggesting here
I'm
that
looking
we
at Mr. Dixon.
It's suggesting here that we can decide not to be a member.
It's basically like any other insurance policy. Yeah, you can determine your value if you wish. It depends on how much risk, I guess, the council is prepared to carry. As I said, a lot of the insurance costs are increasing, of course, with recent major weather events, Gisborne, Tasman. So yeah, it is going up. If we don't have the LAP cover, then we may need to look at perhaps other insurance options, which, that can be explored.
So I understand all of that, and I'm not asking for a decision here, but what I'm saying is the paper has said we will be able to make a conscious choice, and I want to make sure we make a conscious choice at the time, even though that choice is probably going to be to continue with it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pye. Councillor Burt.
My question is for Elliot. I think you're the best person to answer this. So we've had a couple of presentations put to us on behalf of Rooney Group and in relation to fees and charges. Now, I understand that I suppose the two key parts are they reasonable, and the other one really is, are they defensible? He softened the approach today, didn't use the word illegal, and he's used that, I've heard that bandied quite a few times actually in relation to those. But the key here is, are we meeting our obligations? I think financially it may stack up, but the undercarriage that supports that is our policies. Are they correct in place and do support the assertion that our fees and charges are correct?
Through the chair. If I take that question in two parts. The question of fees and charges is a question of evidence and whether or not the decision maker is satisfied. And of course, we've taken on board the submissions through the annual plan process, and we've interrogated those, and we feel in this position that we can, on our best advice, recommend to you that that a 10% increase in light of the inflationary environment, and given that we're all relatively comfortable that we're under recovering here, is a reasonable and defensible course of action in respect of setting those fees. In respect of your question as to the policy framework, the revenue and financing policy is of course relevant to setting these, and we haven't, I've reviewed that policy in light of the criticisms specific to the identification of fees and charges for the individual infrastructure groups, and I've suggested amendments to those, and they're attached, I think, at Annex 3. In my review of the policy, I felt as though, although it wasn't beautifully prosed, the policy itself did envisage fees and charges, primary beneficiary, and acknowledged the difficulty in quantifying these and expected a rather bespoke approach to it. That wasn't carried through into those tables at the end of that policy, and that's what we've suggested is adopted here to enable that. Now, in respect of the question as to whether or not it's lawful to set fees and charges with potentially criticism of the fees and policy, the revenue and financing policies, criticism of that policy, I note that under Section 80 of the Local Government Act, where this decision-making body can make decisions contrary to policy, they just need to identify that and make the change. And so when I look at the Section 150 statutory basis for setting fees and charges, I can't see any mandatory requirement to set them in accordance with a policy. So I differ with Mr. Hole in respect of the governing nature of that policy. It is a policy to guide the council, and the primary thing is evidence in setting those fees and charges. And so my view is that we are quite able to set the fees and charges as we have suggested in light of that policy. And I don't see any, inhibit any, what's it called? Anything stopping us given the nature of the policy's drafting. Yeah.
Very fulsome, thank you.
I have just a follow-up question to that too, Elliot, if I could. So the issue that I understand is around the listing of in the RFP, and so my question is it sufficient that that we reflect a cost recovery model even if the funding mix isn't shown clearly in our policy annex? Because that was the question that came from Rooney Group, was that can we confirm whether fees must be listed in the RFP? So that's sort of what you were asking. So, because that's the question, do they need to be listed, or can we just have a cost recovery model even if the funding mix isn't shown clearly in our policy?
Yeah,
I think that's where...
Yeah, this might take a little bit of going backwards and forwards here, but just picking up on your comment there, we are restricted to cost recovery, so there's nothing else we can do there. And that is the primary determiner of your fees and charges. When you look at the guidance on setting fees and charges, there's a number of considerations, equity, transparency, and so forth, and the policy assists in doing that to the extent it does it at a level that everyone's happy. I mean, that's content. That's up for debate. What I can point to though is that the policy identifies fees and charges, the principle of primary beneficiary, and then now, in accordance with the suggested amendments, identifies the proportion of that in respect of those three infrastructure groups. So we're getting, more transparent. Could it be more transparent? Of course. Yeah. I think what we'd be wanting to do is identify a problem in reality. Like it's all very well to criticise it from an abstract or a theoretical or a policy basis, but what's the actual, where does the rubber hit the road with the problem? What is not transparent?
Can I just...
Yes,
because I suppose my question again too is, are we confident that the current and proposed fees for the infrastructure group are internally consistent with both the LTP's funding impact statements and the RFP body, and will that consistency be shown in the final adopted document? Because at the moment, that's...
In my review of the policy, I did go back to the FISs and the LTP and roughly accorded out the funding makeup for those different activities, so that the RNFP policy reflected it, and so that was one of the comforting things, is that the FIS and the LTP as a whole did actually reflect those different streams, the different fees and charges streams. So as a whole package, it's got a level of transparency. Yeah.
Thank you, Elliot. Questions, councillors? No? Councillor Piddington.
I guess it's a time of year I always feel a bit squeezed, because I just don't think we're quite over the numbers. I mean, we didn't land on grants and loans, I didn't think, or, grants around what we're going to fund. And in terms of that, it's not whether we give people X or Y, it's whether we should be funding that service, those types of things. I don't think we landed roading quite where we thought, after a discussion with the CE, in terms of savings, because every little bit of savings helps. And I just felt that a bit like Councillor Pye, later in the year we get told, it's in the annual plan, so we gave it the green light. And in fact, some of these things I don't think we have given the green light. So I just want us to be on our game next year to where some of these things land. I guess that's kind of all I'm saying, is I don't think we landed quite where we did, time pressures and other things. But Councillor Pye's favourite saying, it's a budget, not a target, and I think we should be really looking after the money next year.
Absolutely agree. Councillor Pye.
Music to my ears.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a question about finance revenue, and I am looking at page 187 of the original council papers, which I assume the numbers haven't changed. But I'm concerned that our financing costs, well, I'm not concerned, I'm pleased that our financing costs have dropped dramatically due to a drop in interest rates. I'm concerned that our financing revenue hasn't dropped by a similar percentage, given that you'd think that the interest rate applied to income, interest received is similar. And I have a part two to that question. Have TDHL refinanced to LGFA? And that answers, your shaking of the head answers my question.
So the finance revenue that we receive is a combination of interest received from TDHL, which no, they haven't refinanced with LGFA, and I don't think they have any intention to at this point in time. And also we have had some favourable interest rate swaps, which form essentially the other part of the interest. Yeah.
Councillor Piddington.
Just a couple of general questions. In the fees and charges for the airport leases, is it the old number or the new number? And where are we at with that? And the second question was, during the annual plan, the residents of Oakwood Road came to us, and I think we said there wasn't anything in the budget. Has someone got back to them to tell them that?
Mr Dixon or Mr Traynor? Thank you.
In regard to the airport leases, I think I'd have to confirm, but I think it's still the old number in there because they haven't been finalised. And when they do, it's actually a slow process anyway, because the number of leases, and some of those leases go out to 2030 plus. So it will be a slow process. So it's not going to be a massive leap in revenue on the year one. It will come through. So we've been conservative.
Second part of that question is, where's it at?
We're still waiting on the valuation coming in, and His Worship actually gave them an extension to the 30th of June to get that valuation in. So once we get that in, we can then move forward.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Booth. Sorry,
Oakwood Road, did someone get back to those residents?
It doesn't sound like anyone did, so we will get back to them.
We'll follow that up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess I'm just looking at the page 187 and the annual plan, and we're budgeting on total revenue 147 million. Funny enough, that was the budget for last year too, but we only got 132. When are we going to actually do some realistic budgets here and actually put in what we potentially might get, but not hopefully going to get? Because this has happened, we've failed in reaching our budget income probably for the last 5 or 6 years.
So just on that, if you remember, when the 24-25 budget was set, we hadn't made a decision on the theatre. We had gone to detailed design, we had put it out to market, and the expectation is that would have been signed off. And these 147 includes those grants, some of those grants and subsidies. That didn't happen. So effectively that drops you down to 141-ish. And I just need to ask the status of the, and also the auditors for the LTP made us and ensured that we put the vested assets into our revenue. So the 147 includes the vested assets. So those are the two big changes. And the rest of it is not too bad.
So 132 million, and so that's roughly whatever, 15 months. So that's the vested assets and the subsidy from
the assets were about 5 point something.
0.6.
For the purposes of us and being fiscally responsible, though, should we not actually just deal with the cash? And if we're getting that, if that's going to be going out on the other side, because we're constantly putting a number up, which is not achievable. We know we're not going to get it. And that's not the cash we're dealing with. I mean,
You're looking at the profit and loss, not the cash flow statement. Cash flow statement.
I'm just looking at 187, the annual plan, and what we're actually talking about our revenue is potentially going to be. But we know that every time we put a number up, it's about 20% or 15% overstated. And it just sets us up for a failure and looking at numbers that actually don't really mean a hell of a lot right through the whole year.
Councillor Pye.
Disagree with you, Councillor Booth. As Mr Traynor tried to point out, one's a P&L, one's a cash flow. And the P&L is audited, and the auditor makes us put vested assets in there. So we can't just take them out. Anyway, I have some questions on the tabled paper annual plan, and apologies for not sending them through, but I only read it this morning. I've got quite a lot of questions on the reserves, and I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll just use one or two as an example. Social Housing Fund, we have a reserve. We're putting 484 into it. We're not taking anything out of it, yet we're spending capital money on social housing. So, and I had the same problem last year that we don't seem to be taking money out of the reserves. We have a lot of reserves around art gallery bequests, yet we buy new pieces of art, but we're not using the reserves to do it. And I just, I don't know, it just seems to be an ongoing thing. Some of our reserves go into negative. I'm not really sure how you can have a negative reserve. So I just wonder if that table needs a little bit of attention. I'll leave that one with you because I don't expect you to answer all of those things individually. They are more general comments. And then I have another couple, just bear with me while I flick through. I was really excited to see Mr Dixon, the Rangitata Arari water charge go back down. That was great. So did Seadown, and I can't understand what we are proposing to charge for the Seadown water when we've just done a massive upgrade is less than last year. How could that be possible?
Mr Dixon, that's you again. She said she was excited, Mr Dixon. Yes.
I'm not sure exactly how the rates are calculated, but it is based on the costs. Of course, the interest costs have dropped, so therefore the cost to those ratepayers will have dropped a little bit. We are also a little bit behind in the delivery of that project, so again, the true costs haven't come through. So I think that those scheme users will be up for increases in the next year and following.
Can we just double check that though? Because
we will follow that up.
Yeah, cool, thank you. From memory, I had one more question and it's on the compliance paper. Annual plan disclosure statement, sorry. And yes, I did just have one. It says that our planned rates increase around the affordability is 9.97, yet we've been banding around 9%, and when I went to school that would be 10%.
So the downlands actually went up a lot more than 9%. And so when we look at the overall, that includes the downlands increase as well.
Are we allowed just to put that in there, including downlands water or something? Because as a ratepayer, you look at that and you go, you keep telling me 9% and it's actually 10.
That's how it reads, isn't it?
We can put like a little disclosure in there, I'm sure. Yep. No.
Is that you, Michelle?
I've been trying to search for my numbers, sorry. I wrote some questions down, but I can't. So I'm hoping that these will make sense. So corporate activities, in our internal charges and overheads, it dropped from, in our LTP, 17.4 million to 6.88 million in the annual plan. What assumptions or allocations were adjusted? I'm sorry, I haven't got the page, but hopefully you know where I'm looking.
So it's a combination of things. So if costs go down in other areas, then there's less to allocate over the rest of the activities. So there hasn't been any major changes to the way that it's been allocated. It's just if you've got a smaller bucket to allocate, then it's less.
Roading and footpath, and I've definitely written down the wrong number. Parking. It says other capital works, we had $5,000 in there and we've spent, and it's 3 million. So what's being delivered and why wasn't it signalled in the LTP? So it has 5K and then we've spent 3 million. Can someone explain to me what that is?
So that was to do with Sophia Street car park. So it wasn't spent in 24-25. So it's been carried over to 25-26 because it was originally in the long-term plan in 24-25. So there's potentially a combination of those items that didn't get spent 24-25 and essentially have been rebudgeted in 25-26.
Car park is very annoying.
And Steph, you've received a fair bit of feedback over the weekend too, haven't you? And we can still send that through until when? What point? Because I know that we're effectively receiving and noting today.
Ultimately, Council has the ability to make decisions whenever they like, but we do have a statutory deadline of the 30th of June if you would like to strike your rates.
Michelle? Yeah.
This is not a question for council officers. I still feel like, as Councillor Piddington has alluded to, we've kind of brushed over a few things, and I just want to make sure that everyone in this room is comfortable that
100%.
We are committing to continuing funding, community funding, the Y and the traffic management for community organisations at the same level as we have in the past, because I just feel like we haven't had that discussion, unless I missed it while I was away. which apparently I haven't, according to Councillor Piddington. So I just want to make sure we make a deliberate decision about that, which is what we told Mr Shaw from the Y that we would do.
And that is what is in this annual plan?
Correct,
Yes.
but I just don't want to approve it and then everyone go, oh, we never talked about that.
Yes.
Didn't know it was in there. I just want to be confident we make a deliberate decision.
Anyone else like to speak to that? Stu.
Again, every decision we make, we're rating people for it. So every lot of 10,000, 20,000, it's coming from somewhere. And I think we're hamstrung on this one because we didn't advance it, we just hid it away. But this year we need to have a policy round ensuring we're funding the right things and, you know, the events are the right events. It just kind of all gets washed over in some ways. And the Wire are a bit unlucky, I acknowledge that. They do great work, but we left it sitting on the table and we haven't addressed 30K's worth, you know. And the great passionate people came to the annual plan, but we are the guardians of the purse. We're elected to make those decisions. So you can't have it both ways, funding lots of things and expecting rates not to go up.
So effectively, a number of things were brought to council in workshops and meetings, and also the hearings from the submissions while I was away, admittedly. However, this is a budget. It doesn't say you have to do it. So effectively, you still get an opportunity to say no. So we can easily bring those papers back, and if you choose not to do it, then we'll be under budget.
That's great for the clarification, because in the past we have been told, oh, it was in the annual plan, therefore there's no stopping it. So I'm happy with that result from the Chief Executive.
Mr Trainer.
It's not a target. Yes, please.
Just remind me, are we waiting on a paper regarding the Pleasant Point swimming pool? Is that in our?
No.
There's a 17A review being completed on the pools. It'll be contained within that. Yep.
Are we at a point now then that we can receive a note? Yeah.
I just add one clarification prior to closing this, is that the Land Transport have been in touch with the Oakwood Road submitter and advised of the deliberations that happened at the meeting and that it would be discussed further today. Because no final decision has been made yet, they can't say it's yes or no, but they have been advised that it was, that the council wasn't looking at doing it.
Thank you. No, thanks very much. So, should we move the recommendations on block, all five? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Parker, seconded Councillor Burt. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, much appreciated. And thanks for answering all our emails and messages in the weekend too. There's no consideration of urgent business now. We'll go to minor nature matters, and Councillor Piddington, Caroline Bay, the Piazza and Strathallan Corner.
Can we add onto a action to register somewhere regarding what we just talked about around grants? So, you know, we've left an organisation hanging. Yep. We need to tell them whether funding them or not.
Yeah, we do. Yep. Noted. Mr Trainer? Yep. Thank you. Pardon? Now, Mr Dixon, I think you could probably resume that seat over there. Make yourself comfortable. Don't forget Councillor Pye was excited to see you. It's on the handset.
The first one, Andrew, is just round the water main break on Caroline Bay. One question, as you said, there's an alternative source. So do we need the source that's broken? We probably do, but I got that question. The second thing is, they said there's some planning around it. Is that in-house? How long is that going to take? I guess people are going to be interested. They don't want it to keep bursting for the next year while we plan and do whatever we're going to do.
I agree that we need to get onto this one. We've obviously got a water main that is nearing the end of its life and is failing a little bit more frequently than we probably anticipated. In regard to the feed, there is 2 feeds to the port, 2 lift lines, and it's really about ensuring the sufficient water volume and pressure to those higher users, in particular tallies is the one that we are focusing on. But it's also the port. The other thing is the firefighting capacity of the port as well. Being an industrial area, we need, if they happen to have some sort of fire event, we need to make sure there's sufficient water going through there. So it is important that that line is there.
Perfect. I mean, it's just good that we get it out there.
Yeah. In regard to the actual replacement, so we had a bit of a war room yesterday. And to get this project basically escalated and quickly as possible. There is some work going on at the moment on the design options, which is fairly simple because it is reasonably good open space down there, but we are digging in sand, so that does make it a little bit challenging when it comes to trenching. There is some work going on in the next couple of days to actually remove the connections that are on there to the sound shell and to the pump station, and a fountain. So we'll be doing an overland feed or a small line to get that out of the way, and then we'll be getting into finalising design. The key thing is the procurement side of things. We need to make sure that we do get good value for money and don't just rush into picking a particular contractor. So we're working on it. And
a rough time frame?
Sorry?
Rough time frame?
You answer that one?
We're going to actually undertake some trial shutdowns as well to see how that can go with that section that keeps breaking, how it behaves while we've also got the overland in. So that'll give us a better idea around that. I suspect everything going through, we should be within about 12 weeks or so, depending on procurement of material.
Second question, Piazza Lift. According to my notes, we should have had it going by now. There's still a board over the front. Where are we at, and who is actually slowing this process down?
The Piazza Lift, I guess, is the gift that keeps on giving, I have to say. Very frustrating. So where we're at the moment is that there were issues with the main ram. That has been repaired. And then when they went to switch the lift on, the electrical switchboard blew. So we have got Schindler down, unfortunately working with them. I have to say that Schindler are very slow, and that is a frustration as well, but we are stuck with them. It's their equipment. So they have repaired the electrical switchboard, and then they went to turn it on again, and the pressure in the ram went through the roof, so we did shut down quickly. They are coming down in a couple of weeks to check the actual hydraulic lines, and there is a filter on there which could be clogged with some foreign material that could be causing that pressure escalation. So I'm hoping to get this lift up and running by the end of July anyway.
Got a lot going for the end of July,
Yeah,
Mr. Dixon.
Yes. Tell me about it. Pressure's on.
So is that lift under warranty, or is it on us, still those costs?
That is a discussion that's yet to be had. Yeah. In hindsight, we should have actually replaced that lift when it was first vandalised, because it is an old lift and it is getting towards the end of its life, but that was a decision that was made because of an insurance. We were going to get insurance money for replacing like with like. If we'd chosen another system, like an Otis lift, we would have lost that insurance money, and we were talking about $150,000.
Extraordinary though, isn't it? If it was inside a building, you wouldn't tolerate it.
The DHB had
Yeah, I know.
DHB had a similar problem with a brand new lift. And in the end, they bit the bullet and took it out.
End of July. Exciting. Stu, there was one more.
Sorry, favourite subject at the moment. You don't want to work in town because everyone tells you about what's happening. My understanding is the design as shown to us can't go ahead because Alpine Energy have not removed their substation and the big concrete entranceway will still be there once we finish. So there's two things. Why haven't we talked to Alpine to advance that? Because all over town they're bringing their other underground sub-mains above ground for health and safety. And B, I don't want them to come to us in a year and say, hey, we're going to do Strathallan Corner. So have we been talking to Alpine actively? When is the time frame? And I get the point there, but people are talking in the town, unfortunately.
Okay, yep, through your worship, just a clarification. Alpine do have some infrastructure down there in that chamber, but the chamber actually belongs to council. It's the old toilet that used to be under there and it's still under there. So we always intended to leave that structure there. We do need to do some strengthening, propping, but that will be fairly easy just using steel frames. We had a structural assessment done on that. So the design has had to change, but only minor in the fact that the seating has just had to be, the tiered seating that's proposed there has been just brought forward a little bit, so it's clear of the chamber. The other minor design changes that have been made is around the disabled access and ensuring that the ramps are at the required gradients for disabled access, and we have removed one. It comes off comes off Stafford Street by the ANZ Bank there, and we're putting in stairs because again, it was too much of a cost effectively to get a gradient all the way down. So we are doing everything we can to actually reduce costs. That's where the minor changes are.
Why wouldn't we have removed it? Because we're going to spend money propping something up that in 10 years we're going to spend more money on. Surely getting Alpine in line and getting rid of that structure.
The structure itself we've had it structurally assessed by a structural engineer. It is sound. It's not going to need replacing in the next 10 years. And to remove it, you'd probably be talking nearly $1 million to do so because it actually stretches right out into the intersection. So it would be one massive hole. Yeah. The actual structural strengthening is basically just a steel frame, so it's fairly low cost.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon.
That's 31 July as well, isn't it?
It is, Councillor Paddington.
Looking forward to July. Councillor Jackson.
Sorry, just backpedaling there to one of the earlier questions that Councillor Piddington was asking about the flooding from the burst water main. So is there any damage that we need to know about down there? Has there been a damage report done, and is there any effect, for example, on the playground?
No, there's no damage to the playground. There was a little bit of water that flowed into the paddling pool. That's been switched off, or it's not actually operating at this time of year anyway. So we'll just have to do that, change the water there, but that's the only damage. And the roses, we're hoping, have survived there, getting wet feet.
Thank you. And I'd like to acknowledge our social media team on the post about the leak down there. It was very entertaining at the same time as it was informative. Well done. Thank you. You may resume your seat, actually. Thank you. Now, public forum items requiring consideration. Now, regarding the petition to Council to comply with United Nations Resolution 2334, do we have any comment or discussion on that? Councillor Pye.
Do we have any indication of how many of our suppliers would be affected by this if we were to move forward?
We do, actually. I'll ask, is Mr Medley still in the building? Or Mr Doran?
I had a brief look through the list and
Yes.
there were very few, if any. They were all reasonably concentrated in the Middle East or America. And there was no names that sprung out of the list.
Thank you.
I don't have an appetite to do anything further in this space, but that's just my personal.
Stu?
I'm with Councillor Pye. There's no doubt there's tragic things going on, but in this case, we may be better to stay in our lane.
We're in the processes of reviewing our procurement policy. We talked about that at Audit and Risk yesterday, so maybe it's an opportunity to look at it at that time.
Yes, certainly. Mr Burt?
Obviously, our reply will talk to these things and say, from a perspective of councillors, philosophically, we support the contention, but in terms of taking it to that next level, I don't think it would, in terms of how that mechanism is going to change things, I can't see it.
Thank you. No further discussion? Thank you. Pardon? Yes, it is, and there is an awful lot going on in the Middle East in particular, and different parts of the world as well. But as Councillor Scott rightly pointed out, if we were to consider this, such a thing it would be when we are reviewing our procurement policy, which is on the radar, of course. And regarding Mr Hull's presentation for the Rooney Group, I thought we traversed it fairly well through fees and charges, but anything you'd like to add to that, Mr Trainer?
We have got our long-awaited revenue review and rates review, so I think that is the really important piece of work that will sort out our revenue finance policy, how we charge rates and how we actually allocate overheads, and also even extending into how do we treat each of our various departments, because I think that that's so important. And it got sheeted home to me by Elliot today that get on with it. Is that right, Elliot? Okay. So
I think we've been saying that too, actually, before Elliot.
Yes, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun for the incoming councillor, but that sort of level of detail and transparency which the businesses that we rely very heavily on to be able to work for us in the district, I think it's very important, and I look forward to us going through that.
Just finishing that up, I think it's really important to get that done before the next LTP, because we've got to make sure that LTP is really on song and we really understand all of those various charges, where they belong, and even extending further out into have we got the mix for what we are funding from rates correct? Because there are some I look at and I go, is this percentage right?
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you very, very much, everybody. That brings us to the end of the agenda, and I declare the meeting closed at 3:48 p.m.
I'd like to say, well chaired, a very good job.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, thank you.
I was waiting to hear what it'd be called. I got this, your worship, all this time. I expected bro or dude.